What if one of the biggest mistakes patients make isn't ignoring their symptoms, but believing they've already received the final answer? You go to the doctor because something feels wrong. Maybe it's numbness in your feet, persistent fatigue, dizziness, brain fog, or a symptom that simply refuses to go away. Your doctor runs tests, reviews the results, then says something that sounds reassuring. Everything looks normal. Most people hear that and assume the search is over. But what if that's not what those words actually mean? What if some of the most common phrases used during medical appointments are being misunderstood every single day? And what if understanding what those phrases really mean could help you get closer to the answers you've been looking for? Today we're counting down 5 phrases that patients hear all the time when symptoms remain unexplained. Not because doctors are wrong, not because anyone is hiding information, but because these phrases often mean something very different from what patients think they mean. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what each phrase really means, and exactly what question to ask next. And make sure you stay until the end, because the number 1 phrase on this list causes more people to stop searching for answers than any other. Let's start with phrase number 5. Your lab work looks completely normal. If you've ever heard those words, you're not alone. In fact, this may be the most commonly misunderstood phrase in modern medicine. Your blood count looks normal. Your kidney function looks normal. Your metabolic panel looks normal. That's genuinely good news. It means several serious conditions have likely been ruled out. But here's the part many patients never hear. Your lab work looks normal does not mean nothing is wrong. Those are 2 completely different statements, and confusing them is where many people get stuck. Standard blood tests are designed to catch major problems: severe infections, kidney failure, uncontrolled diabetes, significant abnormalities. What they're not always designed to catch are the slower, more subtle issues that often affect adults over 60. Issues that can quietly produce symptoms for months, or even years, before they become obvious. That's why some people continue experiencing fatigue, numbness, weakness, or brain fog, even when their routine blood work appears completely normal. And that's exactly where the next layer of investigation begins. Because sometimes the answer isn't hiding in the tests that were run, it's hiding in the tests that weren't. The difference between finding an answer and finding nothing is often much smaller than people realize. When routine lab work comes back normal, many patients assume every possible cause has already been ruled out, but that's not always true. Sometimes routine testing is only the first step. For example, certain nutrient deficiencies can produce symptoms that look surprisingly serious. Vitamin B12 deficiency can cause numbness, tingling, balance problems, fatigue, and brain fog. Low ferritin, your body's stored iron, can leave you feeling exhausted even when standard iron levels appear normal. And thyroid function can sometimes fall within a technical reference range while still contributing to symptoms that affect daily life. None of these are unusual conditions, and none require exotic testing. They simply represent the next layer of investigation. That's why one of the most important questions you can ask is, I'm glad the baseline tests look good, but since my symptoms are still present, what additional tests might help us look deeper? Notice what that question does. It doesn't challenge the doctor. It doesn't reject the results. It simply continues the search. And sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Now let's move to phrase number 4. A phrase that sounds reasonable on the surface, and in many situations, it actually is. You've probably heard it before. Let's just monitor this and see. To be clear, watchful waiting is a legitimate medical strategy. Not every symptom requires immediate testing. Not every finding requires treatment. Sometimes the safest decision really is observation. But the problem begins when observation has no clear destination, no timeline, no checkpoint, no explanation of what changes would trigger action. That's where many patients get lost. Imagine being told to monitor a symptom, then waiting 6 months, 9 months, a year, without ever knowing what you're supposed to be watching for. That's exactly what happened to one older adult who developed intermittent numbness in one foot. The symptom wasn't severe, it wasn't constant, but it never completely disappeared. So the plan was simple. Let's monitor it. The problem? Nobody clearly explained what would signal that monitoring should end and further evaluation should begin. And that's where things started moving in the wrong direction. Monitoring can be a smart medical decision, but only when everyone understands what they're waiting for. The older adult I mentioned was a retired electrician. At first, the numbness affected only one foot. It wasn't painful, it wasn't disabling, it was simply there. So he followed the advice he was given and waited. Weeks became months. Months became nearly a year. By the time additional evaluation was finally performed, the numbness had spread to both feet. What was eventually discovered was a circulation problem that had been developing quietly the entire time. Still treatable, still manageable, but much easier to address months earlier. What stayed with him wasn't the diagnosis. It was something he said afterward. Nobody ever told me what the alarm was supposed to look like. And that's the lesson. Whenever you're told to monitor a symptom, ask one simple question. What specific changes should tell me that it's time to stop monitoring and take action? Write the answer down. Ask about timelines. Ask about warning signs. Ask what would trigger additional testing. Because monitoring without a destination can easily become delay. Now let's move to phrase number 3. This one sounds like a diagnosis. It sounds medical, precise, almost reassuring. But in reality, it often means something very different. The phrase is, it's idiopathic. Many patients hear that word and assume a cause has been identified, but that's not actually what it means. In medicine, idiopathic simply means we can see the condition, but we don't yet know what's causing it. That's an important distinction, because unknown cause is not the same thing as nothing more can be done. It doesn't mean the investigation is finished. It means the investigation has reached a stopping point. For now. Think of it like a detective who has confirmed a crime occurred, but hasn't identified the person responsible. The event is real. The evidence is real. The missing piece is the explanation. And that's where many patients accidentally stop asking questions. They hear a medical term, assume the mystery has been solved, and never realize the search can still continue. Which is why one question can completely change the direction of the conversation. Since the cause is still considered idiopathic, what additional testing or specialist evaluation might help identify the trigger? That single question transforms a dead end into a new starting point. And the next phrase on our list may be even more frustrating. Because millions of adults over 60 hear it every year. And many accept it without ever realizing a treatable condition may still be hiding underneath it. The phrase we're about to discuss may be the most emotionally damaging one on this entire list. Not because it's always wrong, but because of how often people misunderstand it. You've probably heard it before. It's just part of getting older. And to be fair, age does matter. The body changes after 60. Recovery can take longer. Muscles weaken more easily. Circulation changes. Certain conditions become more common. No responsible healthcare professional would deny that. But there's a critical difference between saying, this condition becomes more common with age, and saying, this symptom doesn't deserve further investigation because of age. Those are not the same thing. Age is a risk factor. Age is a context. Age is not a diagnosis. One older adult experienced this firsthand. For nearly 2 years, she complained about persistent fatigue and a heavy feeling in her legs every afternoon. She mentioned it repeatedly during appointments. Each time, the explanation sounded reasonable. Getting older. Less energy. Natural changes in the body. Eventually, she accepted it. But the symptoms never went away. When further evaluation was finally performed, the cause turned out to be a circulation issue affecting blood flow in her legs. Not inevitable aging. Not something she simply had to live with. A specific medical condition. One that happened to be more common in older adults. That distinction changed everything, and it led to one of the most powerful questions in this entire video. If a 40-year-old patient came to you with this exact same symptom, what diagnostic path would you recommend? Think about how different that question is. It isn't confrontational. It isn't argumentative. It simply asks whether age is being treated as context, or as the answer itself. Because sometimes the symptom isn't aging. It's a condition hiding behind aging. And before we move to the number 1 phrase on this list, there's something important you need to understand. These phrases become most dangerous when they start appearing together. First, it's, your labs look normal. Then, let's just monitor it. Then, it's idiopathic. Then, it's part of getting older. Each phrase feels like another door closing. And after enough closed doors, many people stop knocking. They stop asking. They stop reporting symptoms. They start wondering if maybe the problem is all in their head. But that's not what these phrases mean. They don't represent the end of the search. They simply mark the places where the search has already been. And now we've reached the phrase that causes more people to give up than any other. The phrase that sounds final, even when it isn't. We can't find anything wrong. And what those 5 words actually mean may surprise you. Few phrases sound more reassuring than this one. We can't find anything wrong. For many people, those words feel like the end of the conversation. The tests were done, the appointment is over, The answer must be no, nothing is wrong. So they go home. And slowly, something dangerous begins to happen. They start questioning themselves instead of questioning the process. They talk themselves out of symptoms that are still very real. The dizziness, the fatigue, the numbness, the discomfort that keeps showing up day after day. Some patients even stop mentioning it altogether, not because the symptom disappeared, but because they assume there is nowhere left to go. And that's where the misunderstanding begins, because we can't find anything wrong does not mean nothing is wrong. It means the tools used so far have not found the answer. Those are completely different statements. Every medical test has limits. Every diagnostic tool has blind spots. Take a standard electrocardiogram, or ECG. It's one of the most useful heart tests ever developed. But a routine office ECG captures only a brief snapshot of heart activity. A few seconds, that's all. Now imagine a heart rhythm problem that happens once every few hours, or once every few days. If it doesn't occur during those few seconds, the ECG can appear perfectly normal. Not because the symptom isn't real, not because the test failed, but because the event simply wasn't happening at that moment. It's like taking a single photograph of a busy highway and trying to determine whether traffic jams ever occur. The photo may show an empty road. That doesn't prove traffic never exists. It only shows what happened during that brief moment. And that's exactly why some symptoms require different tools, longer monitoring, different imaging, a specialist evaluation, a different doorway into the same problem. One older adult learned this lesson in a way she never expected. For more than a year, she experienced sudden episodes of dizziness. Not spinning, not vertigo, just a strange sensation that felt as if the floor briefly dropped beneath her feet. The episodes lasted only a few seconds. Then they disappeared completely. Every test she received appeared normal, and eventually she stopped bringing it up, because she believed the answer had already been given. But it hadn't. Not even close. The woman eventually mentioned those episodes again during a follow-up visit, almost as an afterthought. She described the feeling carefully, not spinning, not fainting, just a sudden dropping sensation that lasted only a few seconds before disappearing. The description immediately stood out, because symptoms don't always reveal themselves through routine testing. Sometimes the pattern tells the story before the test does. Instead of repeating the same evaluation, a different approach was taken. She was given extended heart monitoring over several days. And that's when the answer finally appeared. An intermittent heart rhythm abnormality that had never shown up during any office ECG. Not because it wasn't there, not because anyone missed it, but because the right test had finally been matched to the right symptom. Later, she said something that perfectly captures the lesson of this entire video. When I heard, "We can't find anything wrong," I thought that meant there was no answer. But it didn't. It simply meant the search hadn't reached the right place yet. And that's the message I want you to remember. The right door may still exist. It may simply be farther down the hallway. That's why one of the most important questions you can ask is, since the testing done so far hasn't found the cause, what specialist or advanced diagnostic evaluation would be the next logical step? Notice what that question does. It doesn't challenge the results. It doesn't argue with the doctor. It simply asks where the investigation goes next. And that's exactly how good medical communication works. Doctors and patients are most effective when they're working together. The more specific information you provide, the easier it becomes to identify patterns that might otherwise be missed. Which brings me to the most practical advice in this entire video. Start a symptom journal. Nothing complicated. A notebook, a notes app, even a piece of paper. Every day write down what symptom occurred, what time it happened, what you were doing, how long it lasted, whether it felt different from before. That's it. Most people are amazed by what happens after 30 days. Symptoms that felt random suddenly reveal patterns. Fatigue appears at the same time every afternoon. Dizziness happens after specific activities. Pain follows a predictable trigger. And those patterns often become the clues that move an investigation forward. So here's your challenge. Before you close this video, open a notes app or grab a notebook. Write down one symptom that still doesn't have a clear explanation, just one. Then track it for the next 30 days. By the time you walk into your next appointment, you'll have something far more valuable than a vague memory. You'll have evidence. And evidence creates better conversations. If you've ever heard one of the 5 phrases we discussed today, let me know in the comments. Which one was it? And what happened next? If you found this video helpful, share it with someone who has been searching for answers to a symptom that still doesn't make sense. And if you enjoy practical health information designed for adults over 60, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future video. Take care of yourself, keep asking thoughtful questions, and remember, a symptom without an answer is not always a dead end. Sometimes it's simply the beginning of the next search.